I hope this doesn't sound like a cheeky question, but I wanted to ask, is there something like a Harvey Weinstein problem going on here? I mean, I'm not suggesting an equivalency between the judiciary and Hollywood, but there does seem at some level, there's a similarity between, how surreal a world Hollywood is and also how surreal a world the judiciary is. Neither one is a normal profession. Normal people don't look at Hollywood and think, oh, I can apply for a job there. It's kind of like a special place. Only special people go there. And it's a similar thing for the judiciary. These are special people. They kind of live and exist outside of normal reality. And we're seeking, your project is seeking to apply some of the normal rules that apply to normal workplaces to a special place. As you said, there's no profession or industry that you can think of where the relationship between a judge and a clerk is quite the same or anywhere near it. Even legislative aides are different because there's more accountability built in, institutionally with elected political leaders as opposed to the judiciary. Do you anticipate resistance, kind of institutional resistance to trying to apply normal rules to something like a very special type of workplace?
So I think right now it's only considered a special workplace because there's some issues in the legal community with deifying judges and disbelieving law clerks. I really think of judges as employers. They are running a workplace and they should be subject to workplace protections and workplace regulations like everyone else. I don't think it's a unique workplace. I think it's a workplace particularly conducive to harassment due to the enormous power disparities, the exemption from Title VII, and the lack of enforcing workplace policies. But no, I don't think these are special workplaces at all.
Let me ask you this. It's been widely reported there's a court back east with 9 justices. And it's been widely reported about a opinion that was leaked and an investigation going on asking for law clerks for cell phones or cell phone data, and lots of hard questions are being asked back there. Did you have any thoughts about the dynamic that's going on back east in terms of those clerks and the Supreme Court justices?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's an enormous invasion of privacy to ask a law clerk for their cell phone records, so I should say that up front. But I think more importantly for my purposes, this issue highlights the enormous power disparity between a Supreme Court justice and his or her law clerks. When a justice asks you for your phone records, you are really not in a position to say no. That doesn't mean you shouldn't. You should say no, and you should hire an attorney. But in terms of folks I've spoken to, just former SCOTUS clerks and other people off the record, they're very concerned about this enormous power disparity where they feel like they can't say no. This is an important case because it's raising awareness of some of the issues I'm talking about on just a heightened level. So
yeah, imagine if you hand your cell phone off to your mentor, to somebody you trust, and there's nothing in there about a leaked draft, but there's all sorts of records in there or texts about something else controversial. Perhaps you're gay, perhaps to anything. There could be career-lasting implications from handing that phone over, and I imagine that any of those law clerks that lawyer up might also face consequences just for lawyering up.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you're a Supreme Court clerk or you're a clerk anywhere, you go into this clerkship hoping for a lifelong mentor relationship, hoping for a positive reference. So yeah, if you were to not turn over your records, or if you were to turn them over and your judge found out something about you that was, less than stellar or otherwise, negative, that would have enormous damage to your career and reputation as well. I think it's just so important to highlight the enormous long-term power that these judges and justices have over their clerks and former clerks' careers.
Yeah, it was on display. There was a J6 hearing this week when you saw one former law clerk questioning on live national TV his former mentor about the actions of another former law clerk. Crazy lifelong relationships formed by these clerkships. Interesting.
I had, speaking of the Supreme Court, and this is a little bit following up on my question about there being a kind of a special, is a judicial clerkship a special type of workplace? Or you answered it's not, or it shouldn't be. But I want to follow up about the perception that it is. So talking about the Supreme Court, there's been reporting that former Supreme Court law clerks command enormous signing bonuses, $400,000, $450,000, and then similarly, there's also reporting that that over 80 former staffers of the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's office are now working in big tech, and I don't imagine big tech is going to the Hill looking for top coders. I don't think that's quite the skill set they expect to find there. There's some other kind of value that they have, and I wondered if in both cases, judicial clerks and other people close to powerful people, is maybe the big value or even the principal value of having these kinds of clerkships and legislative aid positions is the connections that they bring. At some level, the value of having an elite clerkship is that it shows you have these connections. And if I can get, for example, Neil Katyal to put his name on my brief, do I care that he didn't write a word of it? Not a bit. I'm not going to pay Neil Katyal, $2,500 an hour, which is apparently his going rate, because he's Marcel Proust. I'm paying because judges and law clerks are going to see Neil Katyal's name and realize this case is a big deal, and I'm going to look at these arguments with different eyes than if it's just lowly Tim Kowal. So most of us attorneys hawking wills and trusts and breach of contract complaints for a living look at all that and say, yeah, I'd give up a body part to be in this kind of skull and bones club. So how do you respond to that perspective that everyone knows clerkships are not quite a normal job? Not that I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't be. I agree with you that they should be subjected to the same kind of harassment laws and rules. But judges, in a way, are not normal employers. You're getting a special kind of value for being a clerkship. And do you get the feeling that some people kind of take that approach, that working for an elite government official like judges is a special privilege, and maybe you should just suck it up? You ever encounter that kind of resistance?
I do occasionally. I think it's more that I see it bubbling up on Twitter. I'm not sure anybody's willing to say it to my face, knowing what they know about my personal experience. But I think some people certainly feel that way. And I should say, in terms of sharing my story, I've received wider support from male attorneys than from female attorneys. I think the perception among some female attorneys, particularly government attorneys, is we experienced it and we got through it. Why can't you? So I think that is a terrible attitude. I think we are seeking to change workplace culture, and nobody going into a job should be subjecting themselves to harassment, discrimination, retaliation. It might be a privilege to work for a judge, but that doesn't mean you should ever be mistreated in the workplace.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but that I just wanted to set up that question because I wondered if there's that perspective there, because it does strike me as such an unusual workplace, and I just I think it's a struggle, and I'm glad you're taking up that struggle and trying to apply some of our basic basic rules of decency in that kind of surreal workplace.
I really think that
go ahead.
I really think that we should think about judges more as employers, and that when we get down to it with the judicial appointments process, we should be thinking about them more as employers than as judicial decision makers. I mean, this is a bipartisan issue. Both Democratic and Republican judicial appointees mistreat their clerks, and both conservative and liberal clerks face harassment and retaliation. We should really be thinking about who is going to be a good employer, who is going to treat everyone with respect, regardless of your judicial philosophy. I mean, I care less about any one individual ruling than I do about how these judges are treating their clerks, how they're treating the next generation of young attorneys. And I think we should be thinking about that a lot more. I mean, do
you think that that attorneys and even the public at large valorizes judges too much?
Absolutely. There is an enormous problem with deifying these judges, treating them as if they can do no wrong. And it starts in law schools, which is one of the many reasons why I'm trying to tackle this problem with law schools, is because we are taught from day one that judges can do no wrong. I mean, it's everything from the way clerkships are talked about as this checkbox you need for your first job. So many panels starting 1L year on clerkships, bringing all these judges to campus, maintaining these close relationships between judges and law schools and professors. Yes, there's an enormous problem with deifying judges and disbelieving law clerks. And that's why larger cultural change in the legal community is necessary, and why, legislation can't fix everything. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's so important to share my story. And I feel like it resonates with a lot of people, which is a helpful start, but I really need them to understand that my story is not rare. Even if you think it's particularly outrageous, it's not. This is happening in courthouses every day. And if you are not encouraging law clerks to bring their full selves to work, if you are telling them to be silent in the face of mistreatment, you're really part of the problem at this point.
You have just listened to the California Appellate Podcast, a discussion of timely trial tips and the latest cases and news coming from the California Court of Appeal and the California Supreme Court. For more information about the cases discussed in today's episode, our hosts, and other episodes, visit the California Appellate Law Podcast website at calpodcast.com. That's calpodcast.com. Thanks to Jonathan Caro for our intro music. Thank you for listening, and please join us again.